Imagine this. A single candle burns in a room so silent you can hear your own heartbeat. On the table before you lies an ornate wooden box, its surface carved with holy symbols, worn smooth by centuries of reverent hands. You open it, expecting to find a relic from some distant saint, bone from the catacombs perhaps, or a fragment of cloth kissed by the faithful. Instead, you see something else. Something that does not belong in any church. A withered human finger still wearing a gold wedding band. The inscription inside the lid reads only one word: Sanctus. Now listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you was never meant to be spoken. These relics, these so-called sacred vessels that line the altars of old American churches, are not what you think. They were not shipped from Rome. They were not blessed by ancient saints. They were carved from the flesh and bone of the living, men, women, and children, chosen, taken, and sanctified in blood. This is the story of the Ravenhurst family. Though history knows them by other names, Whitmore, Whitmire, sometimes nothing at all, they were artisans, respected, trusted, godly, at least to the world outside. But behind the wooden doors of their Pennsylvania workshop, in the shadows of candlelight and secrecy, they wove a commerce of horror that lasted nearly 50 years, a hidden economy where faith was forged from flesh and fortunes bought with murder. Tonight, you will follow me into that darkness. You will descend into a truth so heavy, so venomous, that most men would choke on it. What they built wasn't just a business. It was a system, a machine of psychological control, feeding on the deepest hunger in the human soul, the need to believe in something greater than ourselves. And they weaponized it. Do you think your church is pure? Do you believe its altars were built with clean hands? What if the very objects that inspired your ancestors' faith were born from screams that no hymn could silence? Stay with me, because once I tell you everything, you will never walk into a church again without wondering, what's inside the box? You know what fascinates me? The way evil never announces itself. It doesn't come roaring through the front door, it drips through the cracks of a righteous house. And the Ravenhursts, they understood this better than anyone. Imagine a family so revered that even their silence was considered holy, their name whispered in sermons, etched into plaques beneath cathedral windows. They were patrons of the faith, financiers of hospitals, founders of orphanages. Every public act screamed charity, virtue, piety. But behind their carved oak doors, behind the veils of incense and lit candles, something older was stirring, a hunger. It began not with greed, but with an obsession, the permanence of influence. They weren't content with mere wealth or land. No. The Ravenhursts wanted something that could outlive bloodlines, something that would make them untouchable even in death. Power sanctified, power disguised as holiness. And so they turned to relics. You've seen them before. The bone of a saint sealed in crystal, the fragment of a robe framed in gold. The objects pilgrims kneel before, kissing glass with trembling lips. What the church tells you is that these pieces came from distant lands, from martyrs long decayed. What they don't tell you is where the new relics came from. The Ravenhursts discovered the secret economy of faith. A bone from an unknown saint could purchase the silence of bishops, the loyalty of kings, the devotion of entire cities. And so they started supplying, quietly, selectively. They began in the shadows, exhuming the forgotten dead from paupers' graves. But soon, that wasn't enough. The church demanded purity, bones from blessed souls, flesh from the innocent. And here is where the story takes its first step into the abyss. The Ravenhursts realized something that should chill you to your core. Holiness is a narrative, not a fact. Declare someone, ia sant, and who will question it? They began creating saints out of living flesh. Yes, living flesh. Because a saint's worth wasn't measured in miracles. It was measured in control. The relics weren't mere souvenirs. They were instruments of psychological domination. The people who touched them believed. And belief is the ultimate leash. Listen to me. Entire revivals were engineered on the bones of the disappeared, entire wars softened by whispers of holy intercession. The Ravenhursts weren't just making relics, they were manufacturing faith. And here's the part that should keep you awake tonight. Their system didn't die with them, it evolved, it adapted. You think this kind of machinery ever stops once it works? Before we go further, before we tear down the next curtain, I want you to answer something in the comments right now. Write this phrase twice to lock it into your mind and into this brotherhood. Power hides in sanctity. Comment it. Twice. Because what you're about to hear, you'll need to remember who you are before we go deeper. Called it the benediction. That was the Ravenhurst's name for the ritual that sealed their control, not over flesh, but over belief. And like all great lies, it was wrapped in prayer. Picture this: a chamber lit only by wax and whispers, velvet curtains to drown out the outside world, a single slab of marble at the center, cold enough to numb the skin. Upon that stone, a body, not always willing. Sometimes an orphan plucked from the very streets their charity claimed to cleanse, sometimes a pilgrim who never made it home. The rite was simple, purity redefined through agony, the sacrifice baptized not in water but in silence, because silence was the first commandment in their scripture of control. From this came the relic, a finger, a rib, a lock of hair sealed in glass and christened with a name that never belonged to it. Then the story. And oh, the story was everything. They wrote hagiographies like poets of deception, miracles invented, virtues exaggerated, martyrdom staged. These fictions were fed to priests who fed them to pulpits, who fed them to the masses. And the masses, they knelt, they kissed, they wept before bones that once screamed. Now here's where the genius, or the madness, truly shows itself. Every relic carried a cipher. A hidden mark etched beneath the gilding, an arrangement of letters and numbers only the Ravenhursts could read. This was their network, an invisible map of influence. Where each relic was placed, which bishop held it, which king prayed to it, all tracked in a lattice of devotion, and through that lattice the family pulled strings like divine puppeteers. Armies marched because of whispers from a saint who never lived. Laws were written under the gaze of hollow skulls. Entire dynasties fell because a bone told the people to distrust their throne. Faith wasn't faith anymore, it was engineering. Belief wasn't born in the soul, it was manufactured in a chamber dripping with wax and lies. Now listen closely. This is the part no one writes about, the part that makes this story dangerous. The cipher still exists, not in books, not in museums, in places you wouldn't expect. And if you knew how to read it, you could trace the same lines of power that still hum beneath the surface of modern faith, modern politics, modern everything. Do you think that lattice just vanished when the Ravenhursts died out? Or do you think it grew, like roots? Roots that crack the foundations of every institution you trust. Here's what I need you to do if you're ready to hear what the cipher says. Comment this phrase 3 times, no spaces, no punctuation. We know the pattern. Do it now, because what comes next isn't for everyone. Only those who understand that history is not what happened, it's what someone wants you to believe happened. You've come this far, which means you're not like the rest. You don't need fairy tales, you need the architecture of truth. So here it is, the cipher. It wasn't numbers, not at first. It was geometry. Patterns burned into reliquaries, etched into the backs of icons, stitched into vestments. 7 points, 3 curves, a lattice disguised as sacred ornamentation. To the ignorant, it was decoration. To the initiated, it was a blueprint. But when the world modernized, so did the pattern. Geometry became language. Language became code. And the code embedded itself into everything the devout touched. Charters, constitutions, banking ledgers, the very script of the law. You've seen it before. You just didn't know how to look. The first layer hides in dates, feast days aligned with political decrees, canonizations timed with wars. Nothing random, ever. The second layer is in initials, 3 letters carved into cathedrals, mirrored in the seals of universities, whispered in mottos that presidents swear by. And the third? The third layer rides the currents of finance, the flow of indulgence turned into the flow of capital. The same families who minted saints now mint currencies. The same symbols etched on relics now watermark your money. This is the part where you start to feel it, isn't it? That low thrum in your chest, the sound of a truth you were never meant to touch. Because once you see the cipher, you start seeing it everywhere. The cross on a hospital wall, look at its proportions, 7 by 3. The logo of your favorite luxury brand. Notice the curvature. It's not aesthetic, it's a signature. The dates your government celebrates. Layer them on a grid and watch the lattice emerge like veins under skin. The Ravenhursts didn't vanish. They migrated, from pulpits to boardrooms, from sanctuaries to parliaments, and their power no longer needs incense and candles. It runs on algorithms and optics. Because faith has a new name now, perception. You still want proof? Fine. Take the next bill in your wallet. Tilt it under light. Find the pattern, 7 marks, 3 slashes, always in sequence. That's not a coincidence. That's a confession. And here's the question you should be asking yourself right now. If the cipher still lives, then so does the ritual. And if the ritual still lives, who's on the slab now? You thought this was history. You thought it was a story. But stories don't breathe. And this one just exhaled on the back of your neck. Because tonight, someone walks the path you just traced with your eyes. Not in a cathedral, those are for tourists. Not in a secret chapel, too obvious. No, the new sanctuaries are everywhere. You can't look without permission. The penthouse of a glass tower that owns half your skyline. A private server farm humming like a mechanical heartbeat under 30 feet of concrete. A meeting room so ordinary you'd forget it as soon as you left, except for the smell of ozone and roses. He stands in the center of the room, jacket off, sleeves rolled. The initiate. Not a priest. He's a CEO. Not a monk. He's a senator. And in his hand, something ancient, its edges soft with centuries of touch. A reliquary? A ledger? No, both. The others circle him. 12 of them, always 12. Phones on silent, watches ticking in unison like insect wings. They begin to chant, not words, but numbers. Strings of digits that look like stock prices, that sound like passwords, that are neither. Their voices rise in a cadence older than any hymn, older than any bank. The code thrums through the walls, syncing with the pulse of distant servers. He speaks the final phrase. 7 syllables. 3 pauses. The cipher, alive. The lattice lights up, not on stone this time, but on screens. Billions of pixels forming the same geometry carved on altars 1,000 years ago. Transactions fire across the globe, shifting more power in a second than 100 wars could, all with the elegance of prayer. And then, silence, like the room just swallowed sound. They look at him, and he looks at you. Yes, you. Because in the time you've taken to read this, your IP has been logged. Your pattern has been noted, and somewhere a decision is being made. Are you a threat or a recruit? You think the ritual ended when the chanting stopped. It didn't. It never does. Power isn't conjured from thin air. Every transaction is an exchange, and the balance must always settle. Here's the part no one tells you. The currency isn't money. Never was. Money is just the veil. The real asset, the one everything else is pegged to, is measured in lives, not in bodies. Bodies rot. They can't hold value. It's in moments. The years someone would have lived, the choices they would have made, the futures that vanish when the numbers click into place. They have a word for it. Not sacrifice. That's too clean, too romantic. They call it correction. When the lattice grows, the world tilts, and to keep the math perfect, someone falls. Sometimes it's a stranger who never sees the car coming. Sometimes it's an entire village that slides into the ocean. And sometimes it's you. You'll feel it before it happens. The static in your teeth. The sense that something is subtracting you from the equation. By the time you notice, the ledger has already balanced. And the worst part, you'll disappear so quietly, it'll sound like nothing more than the world exhaling. Now, with Section 6 complete, here's the progression so far. The whisper beneath the cathedral. Origins. The pattern nobody saw. 3. The infiltration. Lattice in history. The ascension into power. Global reach. The ritual in the now. Modern scene. The ledger of flesh. The price. They tell you it's impossible, that the lattice is too vast, too buried, too self-correcting. They're wrong. You can break it, but not without it noticing you first. The first attempt was a whisper campaign in 1948. Historians will tell you it was politics, ideologies clashing, superpowers posturing. What they won't tell you is how many disappeared after they asked the wrong question. What if the system isn't human? Files were shredded. Witnesses were reassigned, and in the rubble of every failed insurgency the same phrase appears in handwritten margin notes, scrawled in panic. Pull one thread, and the whole cloth bleeds. They thought it was metaphor. It wasn't. Because the lattice is not code. It is not ink on paper. It is a biological contract etched into the nervous system of civilization itself. Every ledger entry is a name, every node a heartbeat. You don't destroy it by smashing servers or burning archives. You destroy it by killing the memory that sustains it, and memory doesn't die quietly. The first rebels learned this when their families began to vanish. Not killed, not buried, just absent, like a story erased mid-sentence. Their names scrubbed from birth records, faces missing from photographs, voices swallowed by an algorithm older than language. They called it nulling, and it spread like a contagion. Those who fought hardest became the first anomalies. Bodies still walking, but hollow, their timelines unraveled and rewoven into something obedient. If you meet one, you'll know. Eyes like static, speech looping in recursive phrases, skin humming with a faint electrical thrum. There is no clean exit. There is only a threshold. You can stop pulling the thread and become what you were, or keep pulling and let the lattice notice what you're trying to erase. And when it notices, it doesn't kill you. It rewrites you.